when you get a chance to have to throw that ring and destroy it to save humanity, or will you keep the ring and hold on to that power because of how good it feels to you? How many people can really throw that ring away?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We left off last time with the question, does the builder matter when it comes to AI? And a lot has happened since then. A lot in the news about Anthropic and OpenAI and this whole issue of government contracts. And it brought up the question, if you read OpenAI's founding charter from 2015 and then read about the Pentagon deal that just happened in 2026, would you recognize it as the same organization, Sine?
I mean, listen, we got to start with what principles OpenAI was founded on, and believe it or not, it was founded over 10 years ago. It was founded in 2015, and Sam Altman, who we all know as the kind of face of OpenAI now, was actually partnered with Elon Musk, and they founded this thing as a nonprofit. And the mission was really to create AGI, very similar to what Demis Hassabis, and what we featured and spoke about Demis Hassabis, and he was creating Google DeepMind. This was actually founded by Elon as a counterweight and sort of a check to say, hey, Google, DeepMind, and Demis can't be the only game in town. And so they founded OpenAI, and their mission was really like sounded super altruistic. It was their mission was to develop AGI that benefits all of humanity rather than serving the private gain of any person. And really, it was like that was why they even named it OpenAI, because it was intended to be open source, and they weren't going to be focused on commercial or capitalistic businesses to make a profit. It was truly intended to be for the people. And then things happen and things change, and they launch ChatGPT, and like the whole world is excited about this. And believe it or not, even during that period, one of the early engineers in OpenAI was Dario Amodei. We'll come back to Dario Amodei because, in fact, that was at the very heart of your question, Chirag, which is, well, should Anthropic have walked away from the government deal? And considering that Sam Altman and Dario Amodei have a very interesting history amongst them, where Dario was really one of the people that was instrumental in the creation of ChatGPT from the very early days. I think he joined a year after, or just maybe under a year after OpenAI started its business. So Dario joined in 2016, right? And
Right.
then
Yep.
and then they had some disagreements, right? And so do you recall what happened after that disagreement, Shrug? I think it was probably around 2020.
2020. Yeah, I think Amadei left due to I think he had concerns about the general direction of safety and commercialization of ChatGPT. So he left, and in 2021 he founded Anthropic and created Claude.
Yeah, wild, right? And so, I mean, I think we all saw that viral video of the two of them not shaking hands. Well, that's some of the reason why they didn't shake hands when they were at the AI summit in India. When everybody else was raising their hands up, the two of them just basically were like, yeah, there's no love lost between them. And that came to bear with your question, sorry, that you asked at the beginning, where it's like, okay, was this a smart move? Was this like responsible, or was this just like insane for him to like just walk away from a government contract, or like was it patriotic or was it unpatriotic? And I mean, look, I can argue if he was a for-profit commercial entity, publicly traded, where his charter is to return value to his shareholders, then it would be a very foolish deal, because that's a very big contract. That's a lot of money. And it also gives your organization a ton of credibility and a ton of access to data that can probably further enrich the quality and the efficacy of your product. So, on many levels, walking away from a deal like that, I think, was irresponsible from a business perspective. What are your thoughts, Chirag?
Yeah. Well, it brings up a larger question, right, about the kind of corporate responsibility, especially when it comes to something like AI. And I think I wonder if the drift, the so-called drift away from this mission, or these kinds of principles is inevitable in a corporation because I mean we talked about this last time. They that their primary responsibility is to the shareholder. So there becomes a kind of a push and pull, right? Like where you can't stick to these principles if your true mission is shareholder value. And you can go back and look at things like Google's original tagline, which was "Don't be evil," and they they quietly removed that at some point in their history. And then we just talked about OpenAI and their founding charter to be open and for the good of humanity. And I think they changed their charter over the years, and now it's very much not open AI. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, do you think that that's even possible for a company or corporation if it gets large enough to stick to its principles?
Well, I think it becomes more and more difficult, and I think they eventually evolve. And I think only if you have a very, very principled leader. I think when like power gets distributed, and I'll go back to one of our earlier episodes, one of my favorite ones, Chirag, where we talk about what the ring in the Lord of the Rings does, and whether you're a hobbit and when you get a chance to have to throw that ring and destroy it to save humanity, or will you keep the ring and hold on to that power because of how good it feels to you? How many people can really throw that ring away? How many people can really turn away a very giant contract that was going to give you, your organization, what you built, sustainability and probably duration for the rest of your life? I mean, you're walking away from a guaranteed contract with a government entity and you say no to it based off of two red lines that you've drawn on the sand. And that does take discipline. It does take courage. When I look at my experiences in corporations, would they have the ability to walk away from a contract like that if they had to compromise on some of their principles? I think it would be very tough. I think it would be very, very tough. I think those lines get blurred and you find justifications to blur those lines when those opportunities present themselves. And I think it's very easy to convince yourself that this is the right thing to do, despite that voice in the back of your head, or that feeling in your stomach that's saying, man, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but you convince yourself it is because of the impact it's going to have, and it's going to help your organization, and then your organization can do more good things, and you justify it. So I think it would be very hard, is my answer,
Yeah.
for people to do. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, maybe now's a good time to talk about. You mentioned those two red lines. Supposedly, those red lines that Dario cited in his statement that he gave to the Department of War. Those are the same two red lines that OpenAI said that the Department of War agreed to when they switched over to OpenAI. So it brings me the question: what was the point then? Like, or what are we not hearing that's happening behind the scenes? And I don't know. What do you think? Like, do you think there is some secret agreement in the behind the scenes that we're not aware of, or is that just lip service by Altman?
Well, let's dig in. Let's dig into that. So the two red lines, let's talk about what they are first, and what our thoughts on them, and then what do we think is the interpretation of the government contract going to OpenAI. So the first red line is no mass domestic surveillance. That if any of the capabilities would be used for those purposes, that would be not in scope for, at least in this case, it was Anthropic. Now, the second red line was no fully autonomous weapons without human oversight or human in the loop. Those don't seem very controversial to me. They seem very clear to me. The interpretation, when you say those are red lines that I'm not willing to cross, and then the next company behind you says we have the same red line, but then gets the contract, I makes me nervous. That
Hmm.
seems very hard to believe that those would be all of a sudden negotiable when it was not negotiable with the first person that said no to you. Like if I'm the government, I'm gonna keep shopping until I find the person that's ready to do what I want them to do. And the
Yeah, I mean, and then,
justifications are for our national
XA
sovereignty. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. No, no, I was gonna say that, like, XAI is there, they could have just moved on to I'm sure, I feel Elon would have been fine with any terms. And then, it's interesting though. It makes me wonder if there was something else behind it. Maybe it wasn't just those two red lines. Maybe it was some other issue between the Department of War and Anthropic that they're not stating openly. That was the real issue, and not these two red lines specifically.
It's absolutely possible. It could be personality clashes. It could be, you know, it could be a power struggle where, you know, the Department of Defense is saying, "Hey, we get to call the shots. Are you, like, are you willing to let us be the leaders now?" And it could be an ego thing where Sam Altman was like, "Yeah, of course. This is we'll partner together on this." And Dario Amodei was like, "Nah, dude, this is my product. Like, I'm calling all the shots." It could very well be. We will never know. We
Right.
will never know. We
Yeah, and
can just go with what we have.
yeah, that does remind me though. When Dario did say that they used Anthropic or Claude during the Maduro raids, and I don't. I think they were not happy about that. So that might have been part of it, that they were so publicly against the government using Claude's models as part of that operation.
Yeah. I'll tell you what concerns me is if you have a disagreement about where the lines are drawn in capability, and you have an American, a citizen saying they disagree with, like, their willingness to compromise on no domestic mass surveillance and no fully autonomous weapons without human oversight. Like, if that's the true narrative, if that's what Anthropic is saying and the government is saying, nope, that's not what we wanted. It was other disagreements. Okay, fine, we'll never know. But then, like, when you see the denigration of the CEO and calling him a liberal, woke, whatever, and then saying that there's a supply chain risk to national security, and that's why they didn't want to use them. Like, the government doesn't even have their story straight as to why they didn't go with Anthropic. And that's why I feel like there's all this swirl and confusion and uncertainty, because there just is not a satisfying reason, and that makes more logical sense than, Dario Amodei just saying, "Hey, they wanted to cross lines that we weren't willing to cross, so we walked away." And that is what happened. I mean, the facts are that there was a deadline that Anthropic had to respond to the Pentagon request, and that was whatever it was, on the 27th of February, or they're going to lose and they didn't reply. They missed the deadline to concede that request, and they wrote back. They published that we cannot, in good faith or good conscience, accede to their request. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if there was a satisfying response, right? Like, I would be able to just say, "Hey, it was two people who didn't agree, and we move on." They weren't able to negotiate an agreement. But when the story's all over the place, Shrug, I feel like something else is there.
Yeah, it definitely sounds fishy.
But now it comes back to, like, a calculation. Like, was this even, like, how do you think Altman played this? Because you know like they came back and they're saying, "Hey, they agreed to us. We also agreed to the same things." Like, how do you think Altman looks in all this?
I I don't know. It sounds like they were already working behind the scenes to try to make the switch. And I think I read that OpenAI was already being used in some other part of the government, maybe not through the Department of War, but somewhere else. So, maybe he was already trying to get in there, and this was just the kind of excuse he needed to be like, hey, you know, he slid into Pete Hegseth's DMs and, made it happen.
Although I'll tell you, I was using Claude today a little bit, and the desktop app was down. So I
Yes,
don't know
I
whether,
saw it
that
went
was
down. Yeah. A little
correlated or
scary.
not. But it was a little.
How dependent I've become on Claude now for my daily workflows. It was a little scary. Although no different than if the internet would go down, right? Like, so we're
I
all
mean,
like
listen.
technology enabled humans, so we have to accept it at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I have a feeling our kids are going to feel that way about a chatbot going down the way that we feel about the internet going down. They won't be able to do their job. They won't be functional without it, and
Yeah.
it's going to be that wired
And
into
before
our
that,
our daily life.
electricity, right? Like These are all like foundational technologies. There's electricity. I mean, when electricity goes out, like I feel completely helpless because you have nothing. Like our kind of lives are revolve around electricity, and then you layer on the internet, and now you layer on AI, and yeah, it just becomes this like cascade of failures that can make you feel like you're in the Stone Age.
Yeah, no doubt. The modern construction of our, whatever, like 21st century life of, uh, it's like we're cavemen, man. Like I feel like without the internet, I'm caveman. I don't know what I'm
Yeah,
Neanderthal. If I go without electricity, I don't know
yeah.
what before cavemen. I don't know. But I don't know, man. Like I guess it goes back to like how interesting it is to try and understand what is in the head of these very, very influential people that are creating this technology that is changing our lives very quickly. And I guess that's one of the big differences between the point that we just raised, where you don't really question the people and the companies that created the pipes of the internet. Meaning, right, like we don't question Verizon, T-Mobile, these companies that have all the pipes that allow us to get internet access. I don't think about the CEO of Verizon intent on like national security, although I'm sure there are a lot, right? But I do think about that now when it comes to maybe four or five people. And we didn't even really talk about Elon, but absolutely Dario Amodei, now Sam Altman, Sam Altman we spoke about. But it's hard not to think of Demis Hassabis and Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and maybe even Bezos and Satya Nadella all in the same light, where they are having such an outsized impact on the future of our world, the future of our country, and now like we're layering in the future of our security, um, physically and from a technological perspective. So I don't know. What do you like? What do you make of the fact that we are now paying attention to these, I don't know, titans of industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought it was interesting that something that Altman said that, they're going to make sure that the people who are responsible for um, the safety of our country or for, military operations have the best tools available. And, I don't know that I disagree with that. And I'm going to pull up another quote here that Satya Nadella from Microsoft said. He said, "We will not withhold technology from institutions that we have elected in democracies to protect the freedoms we enjoy." So it's an interesting point, right? An interesting counter to Amadai, because it's like clearly Dario Amadai has these principles that he's not willing to negotiate on. But I can kind of see the other side too, where it's like, okay, this is a democratically elected government, and they need these tools for the military and for whatever operations. But I think it's fair to for these people to for these leaders to be able to ask questions, right? Because I don't think you can hand over that capability with no questions asked, because I think you get into real trouble there, especially once that Pandora's box is opened. We don't know who's going to be in power in the future. We don't know how it's going to be used now or in the future. So, I think it does become incumbent upon them to ask those questions, because that's a lot of responsibility that they're giving over to the government.
It's true. It's true, and I can't help but think of the replacement paradox, Drug, because as I feel like we're still in the early days of understanding and getting, um, I don't know, into the heads of these titans of industry, the creators of AI. This is, I don't know, one of the more critical moves, but there will be many more chess moves in this game as it continues to unfold in front of us. And this is just a microcosm of the decisions that these leaders are making, and we as a citizenry, we kind of are figuring out what control do we have, because if we see a move like what just happened with the Pentagon contract, where Anthropic said no and OpenAI filled the void right away, if Anthropic is truly as moral and ethical as their decision gives them the belief and the credibility that they are that way, don't we in fact want them in the government contract to push back against these leaders? And If if not, then is this a move for Dario to gain more trust in the public and create even more loyalty to their brand, such that now the people, the citizens, are, could potentially be picking between OpenAI and Anthropic and what they use day to day, and maybe it'll force another reconsideration of the chess move of which way the government may move with further contracts with Anthropic, or I honestly don't know. Maybe that door is closed, and maybe that like OpenAI is going to be the vendor partner for the government, and especially at least for the defense industry. So I guess my question to you is, do you think this is just one move of many, or do you think Anthropic has won the public trust and this is going to be sort of, Anthropic versus OpenAI?
Yeah, that's the flip side of this, right? So they lost a $200 million government contract, but or was it more than that? It was 200 billion. I don't remember. Anyway, whatever. It was a
200
very
million. Yeah, it
large
was
number,
200
right?
million. Yep.
Yeah. But they shot up to number one on the App Store listings. There's a quit or cancel GPT movement, right? That I've been seeing all over my LinkedIn feed on people looking for advice on how they can switch over from ChatGPT to Claude. So you do have to question kind of the motives of Anthropic, right? Because I don't think we can just give them the benefit of the doubt. I think you still have to question them because Eminem is really good at this, right? Where he says a lot of things that are very doomerish about AI, about how, all developer or all, software engineers going to be replaced within 1 year. And I don't know how much he does that because he wants to, pump up the value of his company and how much he truly believes it. And there, I've seen a lot of people question his motives when he talks about this stuff because he is very kind of like, the world's gonna change within 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or whatever it is, whatever timeline he gives. So I think it's only justified then to question his motives here as well. So I guess time will tell. It seems like they've won the public trust for the time being. But this game is, we call it a game. It's moving extremely fast, and things are changing almost on a daily basis. So even me, someone, I keep apprised of AI news, constantly, but I still feel I'm constantly behind. So things are changing too fast to be able to predict how things are going to end up. I mean, who could have predicted what happened in the past, 4 days? But here we are.
Yeah, no question. And man, like it's I feel like we've hit it a couple of times in the conversation today that money and power have such an interesting way of changing what line people with those options are willing to cross and which lines they're not willing to cross. I mean, I agree with what you said in terms of like giving Dario Amodei, like we have to question him. But at this point, I do give him credit for the willingness to walk away from that contract based off of principles, if that is in fact the narrative. And I think just like you said, we do have to push and prod on it. I would just ask anybody listening to this to put yourself in that shoes. If you're that person, your company, your baby, you built it. You've got all these competitors around you breathing down your neck. These guys are fighting the most competitive game in the world right now. These guys are playing
Mhm.
it. Government says, I'm giving you $200 million, and God knows how much more in terms of contract you're going to get. And you say no based on principle. I want to know how many people that are listening would really say no and walk away from that if that was your business and you were in those shoes.
Yeah, fair.
Would you do it, man? Would you walk away? Like, I'll put you on the spot.
That I don't know, man. That's hard to say. I'm building my company right now. I already like it, it's very small, but I still already consider my baby. Yeah, you're right. It would be extremely hard to walk away from a big contract like that. But yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Until and unless you're put in that situation, there's no way to say how you'd react.
I mean, don't you have to have some type of a God complex to walk away from that kind of money? Like, you seriously do?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, I don't know. Listen, there's a reason that they're in the shoes that they're in. I mean, they've already got some level of like, intelligence and like, fortitude to be able to play the game. I know we keep calling it that. I don't know what else to call it,
yeah,
but it does say a lot for whatever the reasons were. It's to be able to walk away from that. He gets some. I think he gets some well deserved credit to be able to walk away from something like that. But as you said, the question is now, what does he really do with it? How does he continue to develop it in a safe and responsible way? I believe his um, safety officer left too, right? Like these safety officers across all of these organizations are leaving. Worries the shit out of me. Like, why is that happening? Maybe that's something that we should dig into next, as to what is it about the position of being a safety officer or a philosophy officer at these LLM companies is making these people walk away. Is it developing too fast? Is it out of their control? Do they feel like they're not being put in a position to be successful, so they walk away? I don't know. We should dig into that. Any initial thoughts from your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's funny. I see a lot of these safety officers kind of walk away from these companies, and I don't know what they're seeing behind the scenes, but it's all like, all right, I'm out. I'm gonna go do philosophy, and like it's kind of scary that it's driving them to have this existential crisis. Like I don't know what is going on in those labs, but that to me that's really scary to see that. Right? I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know.
it is concerning. Maybe one of them will come on our pod and talk to us and make us not feel so worried about this. But yeah, it's not a good sign that those types of folks are walking away. But I mean, look, it's a crucial time for all of this. I don't know if we even can answer the question now of which of these companies is the most safety conscious company on the planet right now. I think we gave some perspective on Demis Hassabis. I think we're featuring both Altman and Amade here. We maybe that we should think about Elon as well, because Elon has been at the ground floor of all of these technologies. He was there when OpenAI started, and him and Sam Altman obviously had a famous rift that Elon did not want the company to be for profit. Elon was there at DeepMind as well, and obviously he's got Grok and is building his own thing. So he's also a very interesting character in the development of AGI and the development of all of this technology that also I'm sure has some really interesting perspectives. He's, I think, more of a doomer, but he's a doomer in a perspective that, but it's good for humanity. He's like a doomer, but like that's just because the way you're looking at it as a doomer. It's really going to be great and beautiful, and nobody's going to have to work anymore.
Well, yeah, his perspective is really interesting because I mentioned it last week, but I listened to that. He was on the Dwarkesh podcast last week, and they get into it deep. Like it was a 3 hour episode, and like he talks about how like he's very doomer, but at the same time he sees no alternative. So it's like, let me, from his perspective at least, he's like, let me build it out so that we have control over it. So it's really interesting. And then he sees physical AI as like the next step. He's building the Optimus robot, and he sees that as kind of our way out of our of Earth, basically, because I think the challenges around humans going into space and colonizing space are just huge, huge challenges with that. So he thinks it's a lot easier to be able to colonize space and to expand the human race, or at least human knowledge, past our solar system if we have robots. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting this down a tangent, but yeah, no, I think I feel like we could do a whole episode on Elon because he has been just instrumental in so many different companies and technologies, and say what you will about him, but he, in certain ways, he is a visionary when it comes to the way he runs these companies, just a single minded focus and what he's able to extract from people, from talent, and from technology. So, yeah, it is extremely interesting. He's just an extremely interesting character.
I think the if you ever do goal setting for yourself, and if you've ever written goals about what you want from your life, and I think a lot of times when I talk to people about it, it's, well, I want to lead a good life. I want to be a good person. And I think most people have that intent. I mean, nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to be an evil SOB and I'm going to just go and, beat up and want to kill people. Like those are people that tend to need some type of more significant help. They're not really well functioning people in society. The vast majority believe what they're doing is good. And I think Elon absolutely does believe what he's doing is good. And I think he very much subscribes to that replacement paradox that we talked about earlier, where, hey, look, you don't want somebody worse, you know know what you got with me. anyone else is going to be worse. So let me be the one that develops this and creates this and leads us into that frontier of where we're already going. So I I don't know what the alternative is, but when I think about what the democratic process teaches us, transparency tends to work, but transparency can only take you so far when you and I don't have, maybe you more so than me, the understanding of how AI really works to be able to even understand what Elon says and what the real risks are. I know when we like hear Dharmesh Shah from HubSpot speak, the way that he even introduced the concept of the what is it, the one page, the context frame, the context window within large language models and how that works. Like that's stuff that they've been thinking about 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they were first building this technology. So they're seeing the patterns ahead of us because they have access to the information ahead of us. So if we take what we see right now and we take what the pioneers are seeing and doing, I think the best we can do is have conversations like we're having, try to understand what the true motivations and the true intents are of these people that are creating this, and then make the decisions of which products we want to use, which leaders we want to subscribe to, which leaders we want to question as a society, as a two people who just like to talk and analyze the world, can help influence their choices in a way. And I think that's the best we can do, even with Elon, because if we stop using his products because we disagree with the move, that's us having some voice and some say. If, as people have done with what happened with the Department of Defense, start moving away from OpenAI and start going more to Claude, we have some power and some control in this. So it's important for us to stay educated. And I feel like that's some of what we're trying to do with this is let's have a conversation, let's share some information the way we read it, and then let people make up your own minds and then choose to use the products that you use based off of the information you have. I, I'm okay personally, right? I have moved more to Claude. That's just the way that I read the situation, but I'm still going to be careful on what and keep following what Amade says. Like I'm not like, you know, convinced that's the only move I'm going to make here. I think I'm still going to wait and evaluate as more information unfolds.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It it feels so late when it comes to AI, but like it's so early. We're just in the infancy of this technology. So I think all this drama that we're seeing, it's just going to intensify, and I think a lot more to come. I'm sure, and we'll have a lot more to say on this topic. I have no doubt in the future years.
The stakes are a little bit higher than like, Netscape, Yahoo,
Yeah,
Broadcom, Google, Ask Jeeves. Like the
yeah,
stakes are a little bit higher than the search engine game
no
that we
doubt.
witnessed back 25 years ago now, 26 years ago, whatever. And I'm with you, man. I think we're gonna have to keep looking at these leaders. And I think you asked the right question at the beginning. Like, does the builder matter? I mean, shit. I mean, absolutely from my perspective. I think that's all I got for today, my friend.
Yeah, I think the leadership. You're right. I think the leadership really drives not only the culture, but like we said with Amadai, it seems like his principles held firm in this situation, and that has to permeate through to the rest of the company, right? And yeah, so there's some hope there, but yeah, it's something to keep watching. I don't think you can just make that decision and sign off, and that's it. Say that's it, but so you just have to keep watching and see what happens.
Yeah, because I mean, if he bears the fruits of that decision, who knows if his lines cross at a different point? Maybe if it was a
Right?
billion
Yep.
dollars, he would have said, "Sure, I'll do it for a billion," but 200 million wasn't enough. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is like this stuff happens all throughout technological advancements, new innovations, new paradigms being built around us, new constructs as we talked about with like, what energy did for society. I wonder how much the personalities of these leaders will in fact influence what the ultimate outcome will be, or are we already headed towards that outcome and these are just like small bit players. It doesn't really matter. AI is already here and it's kind of running the show already, and we're all just little bits and zeros and ones just dancing around in its atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These models are reaching parity, right? Like as they progress, they copy each other. They use the same techniques. they get closer and closer together. They leapfrog each other by little bits, but for the most part, they're all reaching parities. Yeah, maybe you're right. It becomes a commodity, and then it doesn't matter. It's here. The technology is here, and then it doesn't really matter who is at the helm. But yeah, I like to think that it does permeate down from the leader. We already see some differences in terms of the style of ChatGPT versus Claude. I mean, I do, at least, where Claude's a little softer, you know, a little better at writing, and ChatGPT is a little more analytical, and maybe that kind of reflects the personalities of their founders, to some extent. And yeah, Grok is kind of insane. So I'll just leave it at that
Want to unpack
on that
what you
one.
mean by insane? Maybe on another. I think we should do it. I think we should do one on Elon because his story arc certainly carves through Demis and Altman and Amadei. So maybe a follow up will go deeper on Elon and his impact on.
Yeah, yeah. His the Walter Isaacson biography of Elon has been on my list for a long time, but he's such a pivotal modern figure, right? That kind of permeates through society. I feel like we'd all do well to study someone like him, because you know from what I've read, I heard a couple of interviews with Isaacson on about the biography when it came out, and his childhood sounds really, a lot of strife in his childhood, and I think it shaped the person who he is. And he is a very pivotal figure in American history at this point, I'd say. So, yeah, I think definitely we should do an episode on him. But I want to read that book first.
Yeah, I read another, not the Walter Isaacson. There was another biography. I don't know who wrote it, but and he has a very big chip on his shoulder from being bullied as a kid. But but he has always been a voracious reader, super intelligent. I mean, obviously he doesn't get to build and do what he does without being that way, and the way in which he processes information, his work ethic. I mean, yes, you know, he's a 10x human being. He does the work of 10 people, and he's got the brain power of that too. But it's you know, people like that tend to also have ridiculous egos and tend to not be very likable figures and very lonely figures and are like just a bit insane, and that's why you and I are not Elon. We're not insane, or at least maybe I don't know, but at least I don't think we are. We're just sitting here trying to analyze the world and try to make more sense of it, and have some good conversations along the way, and continue to debate on what is good and what does it mean to be good and to not be evil, and try to find balance. But I feel like at the end of the day, when we think about goals and what you want in life, um, balance. I mean, everything is balanced at the end of the day. So I think you take a look at what Elon brings to the world, and it's important for there to be someone that has a balance and a check against Elon. Look at what Amadei and Altman and Demis, what they all bring to the world. If left unchecked and unregulated, um, it can be dangerous, which is why we're hobbits, and we're going to try to keep peace in Middle East, in Middle Earth and the Middle East. Holy
Yeah.
cow, that was a Freudian slip. Shit, I was going back to my Hobbit reference for sure. So unless you're a Hobbit, then we'll keep fighting for balance. But anyway, all right, bud. That's all I got, man. Back to you.
All
Anything else
right.
on your
That's
end?
all
Closing
good.
thoughts?
No, well, I'd like to tease something. I think I wanted to dig into kind of the morality and ethics around those red lines that we talked about, which was the domestic mass surveillance. That goes back to your question of balance. What's a balance between privacy and security, right? And also the fully autonomous weapons, and responsibility. Who takes responsibility when an autonomous weapon, you know, destroys a target or kills a person? So yeah, I'd love to dig into that maybe in a future episode, but yeah, I think we could leave it at that for now.
All right, that sounds like a good tease. We got two. We got Musk, and we've got the morality of those red lines. So that
Yeah,
sounds awesome, man. All right, cool.
yeah.
All right, that's the
All
pod.
right. That's a pod. Until next time.